MKUltra, the shocking truth behind the CIA's secret mind control project. Have you ever felt that something isn't as it seems? That the people in power might be hiding the darkest secrets right in plain sight? Imagine a world where the government experiments with the human mind, not just to understand it, but to control it. A world where unwitting citizens became pawns in a dangerous game of manipulation. This isn't the setup for a dystopian novel. This was the reality of Project MKUltra, one of the most sinister programs ever orchestrated by the CIA. For decades, its existence was shrouded in mystery until declassified documents and brave whistleblowers revealed what can only be described as a nightmare. Today, we'll dive deep into this conspiracy that's not just a theory, but a terrifying fact. Picture the world in the 1950s. Cold War tension was at its peak, with the United States and the Soviet Union locked in a battle for global dominance. Fear ran deep. What if the Soviets could manipulate minds? What if they could create brainwashed super soldiers or extract state secrets from the most reliable operatives? It was this paranoia that gave birth to MKUltra, officially sanctioned in 1953 by CIA Director Allen Dulles. The program's goal was chilling: investigate methods to control human behavior, break minds, rebuild them, and turn people into tools. The CIA didn't just want to know how the enemy might use mind control. They wanted to perfect it themselves. What followed was a descent into scientific madness, veiled under the pretense of national security. MKUltra wasn't a single experiment. It was a vast web of secret projects with one unifying goal: to gain power over the human mind. Under this umbrella, the CIA funded over 150 experiments ranging from the bizarre to the outright inhumane. How far would they go? The answer is unsettling. The agency delved into the world of drugs, hallucinogens, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, and psychological torture. They weren't just probing the limits of human cognition. They were deliberately attempting to break it. The ultimate aim: to create a Manchurian candidate, an individual programmed to follow commands without question. To understand the depths of MKUltra, we need to zoom in on the twisted experiments it spawned. At the heart of the program was the infamous use of LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide. This psychedelic drug, in the wrong hands, became a weapon of chaos. Without consent, civilians, prisoners, and even military personnel were dosed. The results were harrowing. Some subjects experienced absolute psychological breakdowns, describing horrifying hallucinations that blurred the line between real and imaginary. Others lost their memories, their personalities, sometimes permanently. But the CIA wasn't satisfied. They paired LSD with electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation tanks, and sleep deprivation, pushing human beings beyond their limits. Imagine being confined to a dark chamber for days, starved of stimuli, with bright lights flashing sporadically, only to be jolted awake by an electric shock. That was reality for some of MKUltra's victims. It wasn't about their well-being. They were tools in a grand experiment with no regard for human life. It's for national security was the excuse, but the reality was far more disturbing. The victims of MKUltra came from all walks of life. Some were prisoners, already stripped of their rights. Others were unsuspecting civilians recruited from university experiments, believing they were participating in harmless psychological studies. Psychiatric patients, vulnerable and helpless, were among the most targeted. Instead of receiving care, they were subjected to sophisticated forms of mind control designed to dismantle their fragile psyches. Were they volunteers? Not always. In many cases, victims had no idea they were part of an experiment, being dosed with drugs or manipulated psychologically without their consent. Think this couldn't happen to you? Think again. MKUltra used hospitals, universities, mental health institutions, and prisons as hidden laboratories. How would you even know if you had been a test subject? If MKUltra was a monster, its creator was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. Sometimes called the poisoner-in-chief, Gottlieb masterminded the experiments while hiding in the shadows of the CIA. Gottlieb wasn't just a scientist, he was an enigma. Born as the son of immigrants, he rose to become the program's head, blending scientific exploration with the kind of moral detachment only seen in villains. Under his watch, experiments grew more extreme, targeting anyone deemed expendable or irrelevant to society. Yet Gottlieb believed himself to be on the cutting edge of science. The cost: lives shattered, mental health destroyed, and countless victims forever scarred. And when the walls came crashing down, his legacy became one of horror, a modern-day alchemist trying to turn human suffering into power. For over 2 decades, MKUltra was hidden beneath a thick veil of secrecy. But in the 1970s, the CIA made a critical mistake. They underestimated journalists, whistleblowers, and the power of documents. Everything began to unravel when the New York Times published an expose on questionable CIA activities. It caused a ripple effect. Enter the Church Committee, a U.S. Senate committee tasked with investigating CIA misconduct. They uncovered evidence of numerous unethical experiments. Shockingly, the true extent of MKUltra could never be known. In 1973, with the program coming under scrutiny, the CIA deliberately destroyed most of its records. Among the most chilling revelations was the fate of Frank Olson, a U.S. Army biochemist who died under questionable circumstances. Officially labeled a suicide, Olson's death became the centerpiece of conspiracy theories. Had he been silenced because he threatened to blow the whistle on MKUltra? The evidence points to yes. When MKUltra came to light, public outrage ensued. How could a government tasked with protecting its citizens engage in such horrors? Senators demanded accountability, but there was little to show for it. With the destroyed records, most CIA operatives involved walked away unscathed. Even more troubling, survivors who spoke out were met with skepticism and disbelief. Compensation, justice, only a few ever received recognition for their suffering, let alone reparations. MKUltra wasn't just a failed experiment, it was a betrayal of trust between a government and its people. The Church Committee gave America a glimpse into the abyss, but questions were left unanswered. How much of MKUltra remains classified? What other programs might still exist in the shadows? Here's where things get really eerie. Some say MKUltra never truly ended. What if it merely took on a new name, a new face? Cover-ups and classified projects have long been a staple of intelligence agencies. Could secret mind control programs still exist today? Surveillance technologies have advanced far beyond what existed in 1953. With the growth of neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and even brain-computer interfaces, the tools to study and influence human thought have evolved. The question isn't whether governments can continue such experiments, it's whether they would. And if history is any indication, we already know the answer. Does your smartphone track more than your location? Are subliminal messages baked into our media? The theories abound, showing one clear reality. MKUltra created a legacy of mistrust that could fuel conspiracies for decades to come. MKUltra's shadow looms over modern pop culture. From movies like The Manchurian Candidate to TV series like Stranger Things, its themes of mind control and the government's moral corruption are ever present. But what if these pop culture creations are more than fiction? If nothing else, they serve as a haunting reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. What makes MKUltra so terrifying isn't just what the CIA did, it's why they did it. The program represents an alarming truth. When governments are motivated by fear, they may cross ethical boundaries without hesitation. The experiments may have ended, but MKUltra holds a mirror up to society, reflecting the fragile line between progress and exploitation. It teaches us that government power, when divorced from morality, creates monsters. MKUltra was a tipping point, a glimpse into the darkest corners of the human experiment. It reminds us of the importance of vigilance, the need to demand transparency, and the necessity of accountability. The CIA once tried to control minds to protect national security, but at what cost? The next time you ask, what is the government hiding? Remember MKUltra, because once you peel back the layers, you might find more truth than you bargained for. And in the end, the question remains, how much do we really know?